Mm-hmm. Can't live with them. Can't live without them. So what's to do? What are we to do, Dr. Thunder?
Man, I've been trying to get rid of this cat for so long, man.
Been trying to get rid of this cat for so long.
Yeah,
What's the
just
difficulty?
yeah, I just can't seem to quite pull the trigger on it.
All right. You're
Yeah.
not literally trying to execute somebody, are you?
Well, there's been times when that thought has crossed my mind. Yes.
I see, I see, I see. Yeah, but that phrase "can't live with them, can't live without them," and there's certain admonishments, like for example, in business, people always say like hire slowly and fire fast, right?
Yeah.
What are we talking about? We're talking about the need to shift people in these particular categories, okay, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let's go ahead and acknowledge the super chat right there. K Business Podcast, right? K Business Podcast. Go out and check out his channel. Go ahead and drop your channel in the chat, sir. And thank you very much. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Saying, and what does K say? It says, Brother Ike, what's happening? And he also mentioned down here that I think you said that you won yourself a business contract, a government contract. Well, congratulations on that. Congratulations on that. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the
So then,
fact that go ahead, go ahead.
why only the $10 super chat then? Just go through
I think he just won. I think he's like I calculate with the cash flow and
right. He said, I don't have the money yet. I just got the
yeah,
contract.
we'll hit him up. We'll hit him up backstage. We'll hit him up backstage. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So the last few conversations we've been talking about the haters, if you will, right? We've been talking about the haters. We've been talking about how you spot them. That was our first one. How do you go out there with your binoculars and your scope and spot them? What are the demarcations, right? How do you spot people who are not bringing value, if you will, to your life? And then we talked also about how you get rid of them. And in there, if you recall, we came up with kind of a working definition or some kind of a working framework where we said compartmentalize based on trust and function. And then this trust can be kind of broken down into trust based on competence, trust based on intention, and trust based on sobriety. So when we created all kinds of images about how you may compartmentalize people such that you are getting the optimal utility out of them. You're maximizing the upside and minimizing the downside. Where do you put them? In what level of your inner sanctum, or which concentric circle should you place them in? But today we're looking at something, a particular subtlety, right? There are many subtleties that some of which we explored over the last two conversations. A particular one is how exactly to move people around when you have them in the wrong spot. Maybe you brought them into the inner sanctum, but maybe they should be out there in the waiting room, or maybe they should not be in VIP, right? Maybe they should be waiting in line with the other people, that kind of a thing. Or maybe there's something about them that is VIP worthy, okay, but they're messing up all the other aspects. You're ruining the vibe in the VIP room, Dr. Thunder, right? Otherwise this guy is cool, okay? Otherwise they're cool, but you're like, like you're a great whatever musician, bartender, engineer, whatever it may be, and you're great at these other things, and I like hanging out with you. But Jesus Christ, man, you screw up the VIP vibe all the time. So how do you move him out of the VIP room gracefully and put him somewhere where he belongs? That's really what we're talking about today, Dr. Thunder. So, but the first kind of question I have for you, sir, is what are the instances? Either you can think of examples, or you can talk about it generally speaking, where we let people into the inner sanctum, and then we realize that they should have never have gotten past the waiting room. And how do you get yourself into some of these? In our past conversation, we talked, for example, about how people allow people in too quickly. I'm sure that would be
Yeah.
a part of this whole dilemma here. So,
Yeah, and that's been as we were talking last week, that's been a challenge of mine. Something that I've had to grow in is not, not falling in love too easily, too fast. Fools rush in, as they say. Um, So I've had to learn how to kind of turn that thing off, or turn it down or something. Um, but once the person is actually in, and the thing is that often is the case that you may not have been the person that hired them, but now you find yourself in a position where you know you've inherited the leadership role, and so there's a sort of a ready-made team there,
Mhm.
and you have to sort of look around to sort of test the weather,
Mhm.
you know, the political weather, to
Interesting.
see if I get rid of this person or if I advocate strongly to eliminate this position,
Mhm.
what's going to happen? Is that is that going to end up going well for me or not?
Mhm.
And you know, if it's not going to go good for you, then you might have to just suck it up or try to find a way to repurpose the person, or
Mhm.
you know, maybe somewhat marginalize them,
Okay, you
but
should that
without them kind of knowing that you're doing that.
exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So you mentioned the political angle so far, right? You mentioned inheriting a position. This is something where it's political slash systematic. It's not your personal life per se. Let's say it's a work situation. That's kind of the context you've given, right? You inherit a position
Mhm.
of authority, of leadership. You're not the one. This is not your particular inner circle. And then you have the chips on the table as they are. And you're talking about, well,
Yeah.
politically, is it safe? Perhaps timing wise, is it safe? But also, you're saying even if it's not safe to get rid of them, how do I? It's a question out of your last statement. Do it in such a way that it's not obvious that I'm marginalizing them. Now, what came to mind immediately is this, right? So again, what are we talking about, young Swift? We're saying, okay, how are you going to compart? Because remember, we've gone subtle, we've gone nuanced with this idea of cutting people off. This is the third conversation on general, the how to spot them, how to move them around, and so on and so forth, such that we know that it's about compartmentalizing based on trust, function, competence, intention, sobriety. So it's a multi-variable equation, a matrix, if you will, with many rows and columns. Now, how do I go ahead and make this person? How do I move them into a different compartment without them thinking that it's about them? Well, generally speaking, what do you think about this? You make it all about you 100% in the sense that, okay, let's say you're coming in and the way this person operates, okay, is not to your particular liking, okay? You come in and you make it a systematic thing. It just came to mind. What I mean is, okay, you say, hey, I have this system. Okay, this is how I always do things. Okay, it's not you. It's not you. Okay, it's not you. It's just that the role and the way you play it and the kinds of things the way you operate here, it doesn't work with my system. You see, in my system, you get to do this one kick-ass thing. What's the statement? It's like, well, you know what? I think you're too good for the choir. You're a solo
It's
artist.
not
You know,
you, it's me.
it's like, no, no,
That's
it's like
right.
you're a solo artist, young Swift. You should not just be. You're not a mayor choir member. I could use you over here, translating the notes or something.
Right.
Go with it's not you, it's me, but also with a systematic approach. What I mean by systematic approach, because you already mentioned this is some kind of an employment or something like that. So there's a system, there's a way of doing things. So you come up with a way of doing things that sufficiently marginalizes them, and you could do that if you have sufficient authority, right?
Right. It's so tough. I mean, I've worked at a number of churches, and I've been in a variety of different I've had a variety of different levels of authority. And so, you know, if if you're not the head honcho, then yeah, you just have to just deal with it and try to sort of minimize uh try to minimize sort of your interaction with the person.
Mhm.
But if you're the person that they're reporting to and you're constantly seeing significant issues with the way that they're doing things, and it may or may not just be an issue of a different approach to fix the same issue, you know, it may not just be a difference of opinions. Uh,
Mhm,
it could be that they're actually is they're not very good at what they do, or they're not very systematic, or they're not very organized.
mhm,
In the position that you have them in, or I've been in situations where um, there's a critical skill that you're used to the person serving in that capacity. You're used to working with someone that has a particular skill that this person doesn't have that skill.
mhm,
And it's not an issue of if they are talented, intelligent, any of that stuff, capable, um, within what their limitation is. But the people that you've always had, in a particular position, they always have a particular skill set.
mhm, mhm.
Um, and this person just doesn't have that skill set. So what are you going to do? How are you going to be able to do your job at the level that you need to do it when this critical person doesn't have they can't understand, they can't interpret the way that you communicate things,
Okay. So
because there's a technology, maybe there's like a software program that they can't use, and they're not willing to learn that software program, or it's beyond their capability to learn that software program. But that's like the heart and soul of your approach to managing.
mhm.
What are you going to do?
Mm. Okay. So this is a unique corner here of the landscape. This is, you have authority. There are political considerations that'll make it such that doing what young Swift says down there would not be wise, right? So one of the things you mentioned is, okay, maybe it's not politically expedient, maybe
Right.
time wise, it's not the right timing for you to move this person. But how do you go about doing your job such that they don't affect you? Now, that is a particular corner of the so on the whole unequally yoked spectrum of this, that is one kind of unequally yoked. Specifically, like one side of the plow is not moving along in line with the other side of the plow, right? And
Right.
as a result, they got to leave. You're like, hey, my plowing system doesn't work. It's not you, right? It's the plowing system, right? Uh, so that is definitely one approach there. But let's talk a little bit about the harder problem. Let's call this guy the chaotic genius type, right? Let's
Okay.
say that he's fucking yeah. I'm already cussing already.
Yeah, you were supposed to wait
uh,
10 more minutes.
Supposed to wait 10 more minutes. This person is excellent. They're excellent at what they do, right? They are in a particular regard. So in the whole trust thing, perhaps it's in the sobriety camp that they have more of an issue. They're chaotic. They're not so trustworthy. Maybe with time, maybe they practice Ethiopian time, or is it African American time? Is it black time, or what is it over here in the states? What is
CPT time.
CP time, CP time, CPT. Yes, 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 yes. The colored peoples of the world unite to delay and bring to a grinding halt all systems. That is our promise to the global elite. We will take them down one late meeting at a time. But so maybe that's
No,
kind of what the kind of thing they do, but they're a brilliant XYZ ABC, right? And it's not so
right.
far, it's not so crazy that these two things tend to mix, right? Where they can't get along with anybody in the office, but they're the only one that can write that code, right? You run some
Mhm.
you talk about software, for example. Okay. This guy's a software genius. Okay. They're gonna solve artificial general intelligence. Okay. AGI, that's the big one. Oh, machine learning and all that stuff, that's small stuff. Doesn't really matter. This guy's gonna solve AGI. He's gonna solve it all. Okay. But he cannot get along with everybody or anybody. How do you deal with the chaotic genius?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is these scenarios so we just described the same sort of scenario, because in my mind, I have uh, there are corners of my mind that have been reserved for difficult uh, people that I have worked with in the past. Um, Maybe some that I have an occasion to work with even now. I mean, all of us have folks that are not our favorite people to interact with, to work with. Um, but in my description, when I said this particular skill set, um, so let's imagine this. So, say for instance, if the musical director for Justin Timberlake, say if he retires, and you get a call, right? Hey, Justin needs somebody to come in and be his new MD, and he's got a tour, and we're going to be rehearsing for 6 months, to get this tour together. He just needs to, so is it something you want to do? Well, I don't know. You might ask, well, that Justin is not likely to like allow you to make like a lot of changes in the band. Now he's got a great band, but um, there's a tradition of uh, not being able to read sheet music. There's a pretty common tradition of that with players that play by ear players. A lot of great musicians over time, they were not musically literate.
Hmm.
But say maybe your particular approach to musical direction always incorporates, the really intricate arrangements that are best understood and best executed when the musicians, at least critical ones in the band, are musically literate.
Hmm.
Okay, and so that your system is a sheet music based system,
Hmm.
right? You're going to write arrangements in maybe notation software, and you're going to want to be able to email that sheet music to the well, it's not sheet music if you're emailing it. You you want to be able to email the music to folks, and then send them sort of dummy files so that they can kind of hear what it is that you're thinking about, but they could also see it. And it's very intricate, and it's got a lot of nuance and stuff to it. And it keeps you honest when you're in the rehearsal as the director, because you're not forgetting anything or sort of making stuff up, or it's different today than it was last week or something like that, because you just don't remember, but rather everything is really you know is on there. And it also, with Justin Timberlake's kind of show, uh there's a lot of moving parts, and everything is in sync. There's the video is in sync, the lighting is in sync. There's automated cues that are happening in people's in-ear monitors. There's all of this stuff that's happening. And so the more absolute, you know, perfect execution that you can get, the better off you're going to be. So say in your career, the way that you executed that, the way you did that kind of job was through sheet music. And many of the musicians that Justin is not going to allow you to axe, many of them are, they're just not musically literate. Now, is it possible for you to still do the job? And are you probably still going to say yes? Of course, I'm going to say yes. I
Hmm.
mean, what kind of idiot says no to that? Of
Hmm.
course, you say yes.
Hmm.
But what do you do? And then if it is shown that a couple of the musicians are just, they're making a lot of mistakes and stuff is not happening, and you're like, hey, well, this is kind of critical. The keyboard player needs to be able to nail this every single time. And if they could read, it would be no question. And I would also, as a musical director, feel more at peace if I knew that they were looking at the same thing as everyone else was looking at. Right. So, yeah. So what do you do in that scenario? And obviously you're the new guy. So were you going to go to Justin and say, "Hey man, I know you've been working with this cat for like 10 years, the same keyboard player or the same guitar player. I know you've been working with these guys for 15 years. Hey, I know you went to high school.
Mhm.
I know you went to high school with, you know, the bass player. But you know, if you want to get to that next level, you might need to let that cat go." And when can you start having that conversation? You don't even have a good relationship with Justin yet. I mean, it's just like a million things, and then you're still being sort of like hyper scrutinized on your on
Yeah,
your
maybe
on your
Justin was trying
job.
to let you go.
Yeah, right. So it's like, what are they going to do? Are they going to keep the keyboard player that's been there for you know 15 years or something, or are they going to get rid of the guy that just came in suggesting that you should fire the keyboard player?
Mhm,
No, see, it's a really funky kind of scenario, and even if you are able to make certain changes, then you have to look at the way that the rest of the band is going to be sort of looking at you. Man, this guy's like the harbinger of the end times.
mhm,
This guy coming in, look, people are like flying out left and right. You can't trust that guy. You know,
mhm,
yeah.
mhm. So, there's a there are 3 things that come to mind in terms of like, okay, because you mentioned, you said there's so many things going on, okay? This guy went to high school with Justin Bieber. You are the new person on the block. They're gonna be like, "But we've always done it this way. Why do you insist?" So on and so forth. So, if you wanted to throw a little net on it to kinda organize this, there are considerations that have to do with, fairness, group cohesion, and all that stuff, which is a category in and of itself, an aspect of organizational culture, if you will, that is very important, right? You want to keep the band together afterward. Well, I mean, these guys it's all about Justin Bieber in this case, I guess, but because these guys don't really matter.
Timberlake,
I get,
Timberlake.
oh, it's Timberlake. Oh, not Bieber. Oh, sorry, sorry.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would say no to the Bieber gig.
You're not taking the Bieber gig? I mean, come
Nah, I
on.
would not
Bieber
take
is
the Bieber
now.
gig.
Bieber is current, man. Bieber is hip.
Timberlake is the baddest. That would be the baddest gig. That would be so killing. Timberlake would be the gig.
Okay,
He's
I
got a
will not.
great band, full horn section. That's a killing show.
Oh, seems like this is a sacred thing here that I'm trotting on
Yeah,
sacred
you're
ground. I
right,
need to
right.
tread carefully. Can't be talking about Justin Bieber when we're talking about. So the idea is, okay, there's this social aspect. You got to keep that band together. You got to keep Justin. Even if it's not so important that the band, because just Justin is the main character, but there's still these sentiments, right? That
Mhm.
that people want to have. But oh, I can't let Jarani go. So there's that aspect, and then there's the aspect of, well, this is right and well. Let me put it this way: that aspect is the aspect we just mentioned is the aspect of feelings, the aspect of bonding, the group thing, rather emotional, rather unconscious, right? On the systems side of things, on the more, shall we say, conscious mathematical arrangement, whatever side of things, there are also 2 aspects, at least one having to do with, well, this is the right way, okay, of executing my plan, right? Which is pure logic, that kind of a thing. You've chosen the path, and there is no better path from A to B than my musical notation. And it has to be my musical notation because this is, but I was hired because of this and that kind of path. Okay. But
Right,
also, there is the idea of how can you still make something work and perhaps even allow for some creativity.
right.
How much are you willing to bend if those chaotic geniuses in there in the band are also going to bend with you? In other words, right? If you can have beer with Lucas and Ronnie, the wild, alley cats that play great sax and everything on keyboard, but they can't really read the sheet music.
The
And you
Pookies and
give
Ray
them
Rays of the band.
exactly. But they're good again because we're steel manning this. Okay, this is not just a question of oh, you can kick them out. In other words, we said chaotic genius, right? We
Right,
didn't just say chaotic anybody. So they're freaking good, but they're more improvisational in a particular sense of the word. Okay, I don't come for me when I say improvisation because but improvisation in a particular sense of the word, where they're not into the where they're not going to memorize a whole bunch of symbolic arrangements which you're trying to depend on.
right.
because they
Right.
kind of bring all those symbols, but they can improvise and dance, and they're particularly good at that kind of stuff. But that's not what you're trying to do. But you have beer with these guys, right? And you start talking to them about, because trust me, they have that as an insecurity of theirs, and they have that as a presumably they're good at what they do, and they've gone to this height by
Right.
being able to push the envelope. And they may tell you, hey, you know what? Like, I've always really wanted to, expect, how those you guys, whatever it may be. Yeah, I wanted to do more of that kind of thing, more systematic, more symbolic, read music, that kind, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, they're actually willing, right? And like, okay, you know what? Maybe I too may be willing to bend a little bit. Maybe it's for the time being, so on and so forth, that kind of a thing, right? So, in other words, you got to consider the feelings aspect, always key. But if you're, let's say, I believe was it a type 1 or type A manager that
Right.
versus a type B who's really, but depending on your style, depending on the organization, you could come in and just kind of like say, screw all that sentimental stuff. But in reality, it matters to people. Not in my reality, it doesn't really matter that much. But even even when you're doing the practical thing of putting things together, there's that mistake of mixing up the logic of how things could possibly work with just pure logic itself, which just
Yeah.
it's right or wrong. There's no other way to put the icing on this cake. This has been calculated in Frankfurt, Germany, by 7 physicists. Come on. Anyways,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Um, the A and B leader. Uh, that's a good point because yes, the A leader basically has one approach, and that is you do it my way. And in that scenario, I think the A leader is going to crash and burn.
Mhm,
Um, but in the research that led to locating that person as the replacement for the musical director, they would already probably know that about him, right? So they know that he's an A leader and that he runs a tight ship and it's his way or no way, that kind of thing.
mhm,
And maybe that's what they want, but that's not usually the case. Usually, what it is you need to be a flexible style of leader. Um, the buck stops with you, so you can be an A leader with respect to, getting ish done, as it were. If something is not, done because other folks haven't done what they're supposed to be doing, your boss doesn't care about that. They just want the thing to be right and they want it to happen. And they're looking at you. You're the fall guy. Often you put people in positions because you want to know who you can fire. You want to know whose fault this is, and what you can do. And this is one of the reasons, like in the NFL, that there's so much mobility with head coaches, is because that's the fall guy.
mhm,
They have enough visibility for it to communicate to the fans that uh, that there is that this is a significant enough change, and it shows that they understand that there is a problem, and it sort of allows the fan to sort of uh, hold on to some hope that something may change, but low enough so that they can do it without very much effect at all to what's happening with the team. Um, so I'd come into a situation like that, and I'd be very much a B leader. That's what I would do, and I know how to teach folks
mhm,
with several different. Uh, I have several different strategies of teaching, and I've worked with a lot of musicians, both those that were literate and those that didn't read sheet music. And frankly, some of the musicians uh, that I've played with um, and worked with that didn't read music were far better ear players than some of the. In other words, I could play anything and they could just play it right back, and it
mhm,
could be something really difficult.
mhm,
Um, and they had sort of, because they weren't receiving the music through their eyes, uh, in a way their ears got stronger. Now that's not that's not to anybody, any kids that are thinking about, not learning how to read sheet music. That's not a good idea because you work yourself out of a bunch of well, work yourself out. You without having that skill, there's a long list of gigs that you can't do. You
Mhm.
couldn't do musicals. You wouldn't be able to do Broadway shows. You wouldn't be able to do such a long list of things. Playing big bands. Um, you wouldn't be able to play in classical ensembles. From string quartets all the way up to orchestra. Band, marching band, athletic bands, pet band, even like it in your high school or in college and stuff. There's so much stuff that you wouldn't be able to do because you couldn't read music. But often is the case that those that are talented that don't read sheet music, they have had to um, overcompensate. They've had to really get their ear together
Mhm.
because they can't read. So they
Mhm.
would, so like everyone else is reading the sheet music and they're sitting in there like, I hope nobody knows that I can't read. But they listen so well that the second time they play it, it's like they already know everything that they're supposed to play.
Mhm. Now, is it a
That kind of
possibility
stuff.
that this chaotic genius type, and also based on what Audra Brown has here written there, and on the screen, that the chaotic genius type, if I follow with just your example there, that since they
Yep.
develop that ear so well and they have to depend on it so much, that the proximity of that ear to soul, what we consider soul and real vibe, versus a pure system of reading music as some kind of an algorithm and just playing perfectly, right? That
Right.
the chaotic genius, because of their, shall we say, disadvantage when it comes to symbolic notations of all kinds. And this can be people who are symbolically challenged for many reasons. Okay, beyond just the question of can I read music or can I not. There's levels of being symbolically talented versus not. I'm not a symbolic guy, for example, right? I intuitively imagine all my physics and stuff and all that engineering is more of a visual and an intuition and all that kind of stuff. The symbols, the equation is the last kind of thing. I don't start with equations ever. I
Right.
don't kind of feel my way through the world that way, for example, right? So I tend to be in that chaotic genius category, especially for, and if let's say if we were in Europe, okay, I would not be an engineer. I would have been kind of put somewhere, some other weird place. In other words, if I didn't sneak through on purpose, if I just kind of go through the cookie cutter way that they wanted to put me, no, I would probably snuck. But let's just say I didn't. They would have probably put me somewhere else, some kind of other place
Mm.
that's not exactly the school of your technical engineer type, because they're not typically, they're not typically very creative. Let's just put it that way. So that creative thing, that soul thing, where is the advantage? Audra Brown is out there flying the flag for the ear music people. I'm over here saying, oh, the possibility that they're close to their ear gives them this one particular parameter called soul better than the other people. And how do you weigh soul against sheet music?
Yeah. Um, so I'm gonna respond to this, and then I also want to digress somewhat to respond to Nicer's comment about Miles Davis, what Miles would do, which I think is interesting because we know what Miles would do because he did it, and I'll tell you what he did in those circumstances. It may surprise you, um, or maybe not. Uh, so so here's the thing. Um, we want to make sure that there's not a sort of so the greatest musicians are the ones that uh, can play every aspect, can approach music from multiple, uh, you know, angles. Um, the greatest musicians are ones that they are great ear players, but they're also great notation players, right? They're great technicians. Um, and this term perfect, music played too perfect has no soul. Well, I would argue that that music is not perfect then, because one of the factors that must be weighed in on is the soul quotient. So Uh,
Do you agree with
now,
the dichotomy? Do you agree that there is a trade-off there? In other words, because if we just say these are two independent things, and yet they very, you can turn up the soul and turn up your symbolic whatever and perfection
right.
separately. But is there a trade-off? In other words, if you go too much into the dark side and dance with Dionysus too much, you lose some Apollyon or Olympus type stuff. I don't know.
Well, so there's only so many hours in a day, and there's only so much time that you can devote to a particular um, aspect of musicianship, for instance. And since music is what goes in your ears, um, if you can read or if you can't read, as long as what goes in the ears is pleasing, that's what's most important. Um, Now, when you start talking about being a professional musician, a professional working musician, someone that can have uh, multiple streams of income from different kinds of gigs, which would be necessary in uh, interfacing with music in a variety of ways, uh, composing, arranging, writing for all kinds of different ensembles, um, performing in different kinds of groups, playing in church. Maybe nothing's on paper in church. Uh, go to a jazz gig and maybe half of the stuff is um, playing in a musical where everything is notated, and because stuff is notated is no uh, that doesn't give you the license to eliminate the feel or the soul in the music. um, so it's interesting, and your players could also play stiff. I've heard players that weren't particularly uh, they weren't great readers, but their playing sounded stiff and lacked uh, a certain quality. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. Now, if you have to lean in a particular direction with music, then the ear should be the direction you lean, because that's the direction that actually matters. I don't care how you acquire the music, how you understand what the music is or what the tune is. I just care that when I hear it, that it's pleasing to me,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
Music is sound,
mhm,
so who cares what it looks like?
mhm,
Um,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
you just won't be able to. The thing is that there's so much information. It would be like not being able to uh, read, you know, being illiterate. Period.
mhm,
And the only way that you could acquire information was by sitting around and listening to other people talk. Or okay, now there's audiobooks. Now I can listen to audiobooks. But look at how much information that you have to leave on the table. There's just so much that you can't. It's just so inefficient because you're limited to stuff that you've heard, and
mhm,
that's a huge limitation. There's so much stuff that has been notated. There is so much music. There is so much music, you know. So that would be my sort of. Um,
mhm,
it's not really a pushback. It's more of a uh, giving maybe a fuller, more complete context for how both of those skills would both play important parts.
mhm.
Um, to the
I think
question about, go ahead.
you're gonna get it to Miles Davis. Miles
Yeah.
Davis.
Mm.
Well, okay. Or is that what you were about to get to?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Oh no, no. I think no. I think that what you said just now about providing the context was yes, that's the whole point, and that's why we're asking these things. And we,
yeah.
and Audra Brown over here, and we're over here. We're this is beard scratching territory right now. In other words, talking about the subtleties between certain trade-offs between certain skills, especially when it comes to aesthetic judgments. Generally speaking, you could call it soul versus technicality, right? And
Yeah.
it exists in many, many, many things, from basketball to boxing to violin playing, right? That kind of a thing. So
So,
uh,
one thing about, and this is a point that I frequently make.
mhm,
Um, every perceivable, um, every perceivable uh, aspect of music that is interpreted as soul or having feel or um, being bluesy or however you want to go, that full of spirit,
Mhm.
however you want to contextualize it, every single one of those things requires a particular technique to execute. Okay, it all requires there's a particular way
Mhm.
and um, mastery of a technical
Mhm.
aspect of playing your instrument
Mhm.
that must be perfected in order to, uh, you know, uh, access that soul.
Mhm.
And so it's an interesting sort of, and it creates certain kinds of problems and maybe some cognitive dissonance, and hard to talk about it too technically without it sort of getting totally lost.
Mhm.
But it's a very interesting kind of aspect of what's going on when you're playing an instrument, and the instrument that you're playing is a machine, and so in order to master the machine, you must become a machine.
Mhm.
The machine will never become organic. It will never take on your personality or right.
Oh, Dr. Thunder, look at this. You're like Skynet. You're like the agent in the Matrix. You're just all over like no, like it can be perfectly modeled. That thing you call soul, it was a particular frequency and a particular bend. When he did this, it's like no, it was the bend on the whatever, and I can also match that with my algorithms. I tell you.
So the interesting thing is, in order to make your music full of emotion, you must thoroughly master the machine. And again, you must become a machine to do so that the machine disappears, right? Eh, Um, there's no clunkiness, there's no um, you're not missing notes, you're not squeaking, you're not, everything is happening with a certain level of
Uh,
consistency. And
Not reading while you play too is important, right? Because even if you can read, you shouldn't be. It's almost like being a good stenographer, for example, all those kinds of things, right? You
well,
want it to be.
so that's interesting also because okay, so uh, I tour with the Basie band frequently. I'm not a regular part of the band, but I've done a number of tours with them, um, and I've been told that I'll be called again when we get some tours happening. Obviously, stuff is still kind of up in the air, but I'll tell you one thing about that band: those charts are really old, and they don't email you anything. You're not getting emailed PDFs of the charts. You show up for the gig, and you're sight reading the gig. So um, so now imagine you haven't seen this music before. You must sight read it, and you must sight read it uh, full of emotion, full of nuance, full of soul. Right? You're sight reading. It's like reading a book for the first time. You know, and in some way being able to predict where certain inflections in your voice should be present. Right? You haven't read it before. You've not even heard it. You have no idea. Right? So so a great musician will have the ability to transmit that emotion, though they're reading. You're reading something, but you're still able to transmit the emotion that the reading, even the reading that you don't even know the next words or the next notes, the next rhythms, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm. What
just
would Miles Davis do? Because, ladies and gentlemen, this is okay. Should you take them out? ladies and gentlemen?
Right.
Should you take them out or should you keep them around? And we are looking at the different ways in which we put people in different compartments based on function, based on trust, right? And based on competence. And we dealt with a very difficult one. Okay. We went into the rabbit hole of the chaotic genius. That's where we were. Okay. In case you lost your way, ladies and gentlemen, you're like, what happened? How did we end up here with Miles Davis and the this and the that and the technicality versus the soul? Well, we talk about the chaotic genius, and it's a difficult one. You got to know how to place them. We talked about the fact
That's right.
that maybe you want to see how willing they are, this chaotic man, to come into the area of symbolic notation a little bit and systems a little bit and see how it works. Or maybe you can showcase their particular talent, because freestyling, right, is a particular art of in of its own, right? And freestyling competitions are different from here's my written rap competition. Right? Maybe both of them
Right.
are, so maybe there should be forums, means, methods, modalities, if you will, of highlighting, because in the case of the chaotic genius, they do have something to offer. In the case of the person we talked of last time, who's not doesn't really have much to offer, we just say switch the system, right? Bend the river around this person. Okay, it's not you, it's the system. Okay, it's
Right.
not
Right.
you. It's just the way it's the software. It's the way whatever
That's
works.
right.
But in this case, one option for the chaotic genius that may be highlighting, right? Well, what will Miles Davis do? He is one of those kind of he runs a tight ship. I would suspect.
Yeah. So Miles was a really um, interesting figure. Um, it would be easy to characterize him as a jerk. He was he did things to his to his bandmates uh, to sort of elicit certain emotion. So, for instance, there was a performance. Big, it was a big deal. It was like they were playing on television or something, and right before they walked out to start the gig, he told them, "By the way, you guys are doing this gig for free today because I donated your check to some charitable something." And so everybody's like super ticked off. They go out and play the gig, and it's like this really kind of angry, kind of um, aggressive, kind of playing. Um, John Coltrane played in Miles's band.
Mm,
He had a couple different stints playing with him,
mhm,
and so he got kicked out of the band because he was becoming unreliable. John Coltrane did, because he was becoming unreliable because he was a drug addict. And so Miles kicked him out of the band. And there's uh, there's something in his autobiography, Miles's autobiography, that talks about how he actually physically smacked John Coltrane, um, you know, in some sort of um, altercation or whatever. So he was you want to talk about the chaotic genius. Miles was the chaotic genius, right? Um, but he was also the boss. um, so
mhm,
the bandmates kind of dealing with him was kind of an interesting sort of thing. But he got the best guys, and he would frequently, like, he had like the best musicians on the earth, on planet Earth, and they're also, like, Wayne Shorter was in his band. He was a great composer. All of these great musicians, and so he would frequently, like, take the compositions of these guys, and he would just, like, change them. Oh, well, we're going to do it like this, so I'm changing this to be this. You know, and it's like, wait a minute, this is like my composition. You're free to write your own composition. Do whatever you like, but this is my composition. But that was just his way, and people knew, the guys that played with him knew that he was that way.
mm,
He was kind of but he was also like he was the kingmaker. everybody that played in his band for their lifetime was set up.
Mhm, mhm,
You
mhm,
know, even if it was in a small way, like they played like 3 gigs with him.
mhm.
They can they can still cash that check. You know,
Indeed. There's an aspect of this thing I want us to get to, because
sure.
when it comes to should you keep them in, should you leave them out, there is this old admonishment which is adjacent, but definitely in the same territory, which is about enemies. Keeping your enemies close, right? We're talking about compartmentalizing people again based on function and trust, right? So this is more on the trust side. Again, trust, again, you can talk about trust based on competence, sobriety, and also based on intentions. Now, what do you think about that statement? The statement of keep your enemies close, both in terms of what you think it's trying to say, perhaps its misinterpretations, and where you stand, okay, as to the validity of this particular, what shall we say, the saliency, the relevance of the admonishment.
So you want to keep your enemies close because um, you want to know what they're doing. So that would be one reason. You want to know what your enemies are doing, what they're thinking. You want to keep them close because you also want to learn from them, right? So, your competitor. So let's look at Samsung and Apple.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, they are very close, though they are sworn enemies. They are very close because they constantly borrowing each other's technology, and there's always some sort of litigation going on because because there's a lot of mobility between people bouncing back and forth between companies, and there's just all of this stuff. And Samsung has uh, designed and made a bunch of uh, tech, uh, has developed certain pieces of technology for Apple. You know, so there's like an interesting sort of connection there. They're definitely keeping each other's close. They're definitely learning a lot of stuff from each other. Um, you can see even with the way that the Samsung phones look now. If you rewind, I don't know, 8 years or something, and look what their phones look like then. Look at what they look like now. It's like, dude, they clearly are taking on aspects of that sort of the Apple, the iPhone sort of design. But then if you look at the software in the iPhone, the iOS has taken on a lot of the Android capability. Um, Even like adding stuff like widgets and things like that, which is stuff that they said they were never going to do or whatever. But now they have widgets, and that was something that the Android stuff, the system accommodated for a long time. So it's an interesting kind of thing. So you have an opportunity to learn from each other. You want to, again, if someone is plotting against you, if you're keeping yourself close to them, then maybe they'll let out the bag or something what the what some of their plans are. Um,
Mhm, 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 mhm.
so yeah, I think
Yep,
there's some
yeah.
validity to that.
Okay, good. So you keep them close, you see their plans, you see their associates, you see whom they're doing it with, you see who's doing it with them, you're able to make predictions, you're able to learn from them, you say. And again, this is all in that camp of people whom you may think you should get rid of, but counterintuitively, maybe you should keep close, right? The idea is, should you take them out or should you keep them around? That is the question. Now, there is also another side of the enemy side thing, or at least one more aspect. There are a few more, but when it comes to it is the whole shadow thing I'm getting to now. In other words, when you don't like something, there is a part of you that's projecting that thing out. And there's a projection. There is a side of you in that thing. Okay. Now this is a different kind of it depends because there are many kinds of enemies, right? If it's just your rival, I don't think that Apple is Samsung Shadow or something. Or
Right.
they're these conscious entities in this Jungian universe. But the idea of you learning a lot from someone whom is can get up to the attention of being like a rival of yours, and that whom there's something about that you're quite ticked off about. Um, that there's a lot to learn by how by from not from how you deal with the whole situation, because it's not just about them, because I'm talking about the whole context now. You looking at that person, and that person also, the whole interaction, this whole assumption of that, this is a side of things in us that we tend to condemn outwardly, right?
Yeah.
So definitely is that on the learn side of why you should keep your enemies close, because in terms, so other than the fact that you're projecting, the way you
Hmm.
deal with your enemies, the kind of shall we say, presence of mind, they keep you sharp. In other words, is one thing you
Right.
said,
Right.
everything you said, right? Yeah, everything you said about keeping them close, watching this, and learning from them, keep you sharp. You're not just
Yeah.
like laying around getting fat, right? Somewhere without any
Right.
competition. So they keep you sharp, whether it be in the marketplace, or they keep you sharp psychologically when it be in the realm of regular relationships. And we're talking about real rivals now. We're not talking about, oh, keep every enemy, every dirtbag around. No, we're talking about, look, Apple and Samsung. They're enough. Those are fit rivals. Okay, not Apple and your Taiwanese back of the house phone making company, but people whom are fit to be rivals. If you see someone at that level, if you view someone that way, you can learn a lot already about yourself, like about, if only about the thing that you've. One thing for sure is you learn about the kinds of things that you view that way, and the kinds of things that you pay attention to in the world, and the kinds of things that move you in the world, because apparently your rival is one of those kinds of things. So um
Yeah.
I don't know if I had something to add to that, or if you wanted to
Yeah.
move
No, I
on.
mean, no, I mean, I think that having, I like this idea of like, using your enemy as a way to keep you sharp. Um, that they're over there, you know, you can almost like think of like I don't know, like a head coach, for a football team, and they're about to play their like arch rivals, and they're having like two-a-day practices and stuff all week to get ready to play against their arch rivals. And he's telling them, "Do you think that the other team is is taking it easy over there?"
Mhm,
So you can kind of imagine that your foe is, if they're any good, they're going to be working hard. So that means that you need to work at least as harder, just to make sure,
mhm,
maybe assume that they don't have to work as hard to get the same results as you do, and so then put forth more effort in. um yeah.
mhm, mhm, mhm. So another side of this thing is this one is the easier one. The chaotic genius was a difficult thing to tackle. I think that this thing about the enemies, keeping them close. I think, yeah, we're saying that there's a lot about it that is true, that is sound. Don't go ahead. Don't keep these ones around. Okay, keep these guys around, and they belong in that rival place, if you will, the rival compartment. To stick with our working definition of what we're talking about here, there is something about people whom are motivated by different things. Something about the guy, let's say, whom requires you to for there to be a group hug. And there are many ways of having group hugs. There are
Oh.
many ways of having group hugs. It could be, you know, taking a silly picture after the regular one after the team meeting is over, or it could be anything of that sort. In other words, it's similar to when you talked about the Justin Timberlake, okay, Justin Timberlake band, right?
Mm.
Not Bieber, and
Yeah.
how you were going to have to talk to Justin about the guy, you know. And I said that there's a realm of that fairness, group cohesion, and that whole feel good realm that is very important to people. Okay, right? Is and then I talked about the realms of both actionable things and possible actions, and then also just pure logic. But in this realm of feelings and such, it's now where we're back into again. Okay, we're saying that some people require, for example, a little bit more of that kind of an interaction in order for them to feel like they're respected, acknowledged partner within the whole thing, and you may not need as much, and you need to know how to compartmentalize these type of people, right? This is not a very crazy, as I say, it's not a hard one per se, right? uh, but it can be challenging, right? It's the whole, okay, well, let me put it this way. We all know this guy, right? Okay, so shout out to Audra and Young Swift. We all know this person, right? This is the person that you guys are going to Vegas, okay? And it's a 3-day trip, and they have every fucking I have to cuss. Okay, I gotta let me take full advantage. They have every fucking hour of that 3-day trip planned, not just for you. Oh, not just for them. No, 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 for you, for everybody. Right? We say,
Man.
because what we're gonna do when we land. First, we gotta stop by my cousin's whatever shop, and then he's
Oh,
gonna take us to the
goodness.
cool spot. And then, right, 30 minutes, that should be enough for everybody, right, to get ready. We're gonna go down and see the whatever show. And then I got a tour bus. And then the next morning, immediately 8 a.m., we got to be at the gun range. You know, we know that guy, right? The guy who's like, so. And then you're more like, I don't know. I just kind of wanted to go with the flow. Generally speaking, my thing is I just want to work, right? If I can work, if this is conducive for working, I can multitask. But am I just trying to get sunburned and tired and drinking beers and talking to idiots? It's not. That's not what I call a productive day. But how do you deal with those kinds of situations, sir?
Yeah. So, oh my goodness. So what this immediately makes me think of, and this is something that I struggle with my wife. She's always telling me that I need to do more of this, or she's feeling like I don't care about her feelings, and there's that kind of stuff that happens, and I tend to be focusing just on the details, you know, and the details are very important. But feelings are of some value, um, and so you can't just totally ignore that.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
part of me is like, I already deal with this with my wife. I do not want to have to deal with that with someone I work with. That's
Mhm.
like it's like overload. And
Yep.
plus you're a dude, guy. You're a dude. So
Mhm,
I tend to be very, like I said, I'm detail oriented, and I am, I'm thinking about I'm thinking about the stuff that I think matters, which is, stuff getting done in a timely manner, you know, stuff being doled out a certain way. Um, and there are other people that I work with that are more of the, I'm going to bring donuts to the faculty meeting, or I'm going to, um, out of my own money, um, or I'm going to bring hot dogs to the, outside concert or something, and fry them up on there, and stuff like that. And, you know, I think at first, the way that I process stuff is like, what is this guy compensating for? Like, why do you feel like you need to do something that is clearly not your responsibility?
Mhm.
What are you trying to compensate for? And then, but then after a while, it's like, you know what? Maybe it's not as much as trying to compensate for something. Maybe it's just that's what they bring. That's part of what they bring. And so
Mhm.
rather than trying to like, rather than sort of thinking of it in a negative sense, I think
Mhm.
it's positive. And then what I've started to do is whenever there are, I don't know, I don't want to say finesse because that has a certain um, negative connotation to it. But if certain folks you think that they need a little encouragement to, I don't know, give a certain donation or whatever, then now I know who it is that naturally is going to feel is going to think of the kind of things that may help to push that person over the edge. I can give them all of the data, all of the reasons, why this should be it. But sometimes just that like kind of extra
Mhm.
little touch, that kind of touchy feely thing that
Mhm.
I'm not comfortable with.
Mhm.
And if somebody tried to do that to me, I would feel like what I would immediately feel like, what, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this for me now? Like I don't understand why you're doing this. And until I understand why you're doing this, I'm going to hold you at arm's length now.
Mhm.
You would have been better off just coming in with the data, than coming in with like some donuts or like a card, in your presentation or something. Because now it's like now I'm like wondering why would you do something like that? It just can get weird. So I've
Mhm.
I've had to try to turn that off and to try to change it into being an actual positive thing. It's like now I
Mhm.
have a certain person that I can sort of utilize in a certain way. I can say, "Hey, this guy, he really likes doing this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Man, I'm gonna turn him loose on this other, you know,
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
stuff that I
Mhm.
don't wanna do."
Good. So, that's interesting because you mentioned, you see somebody, I believe it's Ayn Rand. I'm sure you're familiar with Ayn Rand. Uh, I used to be a, well, once a Randroid, as always a Randroid. I was one of those kids, right? That is like, yeah, I'm the individual, and these other dumbass, over here, they don't understand. Um, and the thing about Rand is, I'm not one of those people that says I grew past it. I think that's silly when you say things like that about people. Like you're like, that's crazy. Shut up. Um,
Mm.
they were there for you at that time, and they were the particular. You don't do that kind of a thing. You know, like Rand was true, or is true, regardless of how perhaps narrow a perspective, right? But
Hmm.
true, because I know that it's a personality type, and also it's a certain, okay. Rand is a personality type slash, let's say, level of intelligence, right? That kind of bend you towards that thing. You're not very social, okay, and then you're kind of intelligent, a little bit of an outcast, and then you're gonna see through, and you're just gonna be like, why do these people feel like they can tell me anything? Like rule, I see how they operate. They're sheep, right? And why should they have any, that kind of thing? And you're a teenager and all that kind of stuff, and you're like, you're rebelling. So all that's true, you know. In other words, when you cross the river, don't you know leave the canoe behind, but don't insult the canoe. That's my Buddhist little thing that I used to kind of, don't be like, that stupid boat. It's like, dude, you had to cross that river, and don't start talking shit about the boat now, because now you got helicopters and stuff. It's like, no, that's a great
Right.
boat, because you had to go through
Yep.
that part of the journey. So I say all that to say this.
Right, right. Don't despise your journey. That's right.
Exactly, exactly.
Yep.
So the whole, okay. So where are we at again? Because there are a number of directions here. You talked about your wife, right? And the fact that
Yeah.
Ayn Rand said that to love is to make exceptions for. It's a very kind of a living. It's a very pragmatic definition of stuff because it involves doing, right? It
Right.
doesn't say something like, "Oh, love me, some flowery sky of the
Yeah.
essence of the sun light
Yeah.
through my skylight." You know, not that. It's making exceptions, or the one for whom you will make exceptions. So I'm getting to a point here, which is the point of you having only a certain amount of reservoir for the extroverted feeling world, for the world of parties,
Mm.
backslaps, donuts, highs, and my daughters, and let's do a silly one now, and all those kinds of
Uh,
things. Okay, you only have a certain reservoir for it, and love is about the person for whom you would make those particular exceptions, and it is a
yes.
quantitative thing. You don't have an infinite reservoir of it. This is a practical thing, right? You don't have an
Right.
infinite reservoir of it, so you can
Yeah.
only give. There's only one person in the inner sanctum of I will get you. I'll go talk and smile for an hour and a half somewhere while sipping some wine, and it better be good wine. You know,
Right. Right. Right.
if I'm gonna do this, they better have great scotch, at least 12-year aged. Okay. Uh, so, I don't want to go to work and then also have to do it with you guys. It's like, dude, I'm done. Okay, I'm
No,
done. I'm smiled
I,
out.
yeah, I have a very low. So God bless my wife. Um, I have such a little reservoir for that uh, at times it's not enough for her. So where am I? Where am I supposed to get all of this extra to deal
You see,
with
but
a
the
dude
beauty
at
of it
my
is,
job?
yeah, the beauty of it has to do with the other part of what you said. The other part of what you said has to do with, you said, oh well, there's a use for them, there's a functionality, and so on and so forth. Okay, but here's the beauty slash the irony of it, because um, there's a everyone we all have a subjective bias, okay, and the more rare we are, the more, shall we say, the more heavy our subjective bias is, but also the more, it doesn't hold any weight out there in public. You can't be like,
Mm,
oh, but how about my view as the chaotic artist genius? It's like there's like only one of those every generation, so it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It's like the herd is just going to overrun you. But you talked about the fact that these people are useful, and it's not a question of value judgment, but we do know how, no judgment implied here, the herd moves. And it moves with donuts and um, facial gestures and feelings, right? That are contagious and then move the group, right? And there is no
yeah.
reason to now forget our quantitative analysis, which tells us that we are in the minority, right? And because
Yes.
when you say certain things like this, I got to bring back to the reality, like, dude, we got to recognize, you know, uh, there's a part of it that sounds crazy. There's a part of it that sounds navel gazing. There's a part of it that also sounds, shall we say, braggish, but it doesn't really matter because it's the truth. When you're in a minority in that case, you got to know how the herd moves, and also you have to know how a part of you moves as well, because you're also part of that. You're also a herd
Right.
animal, just like them, right? It's a question of
Right.
degree, right, and context. So that is their function. That is the way the mass is moving. Your little definition over here in this corner about what to be conscious and to be a man is, that is just a that's a little corner, right? The mass is moving with backslaps, donuts, feelings, extroverted feeling world of
Yeah.
fairness and how we get along and go along to get along, if you will.
Yeah. What is it? Uh, honey rather than vinegar.
Yeah, yeah, and the beauty of it, here's the beauty of, here's the potential beauty, is that if you understand, okay, number one, in any relationship, there's always a varying degree of understanding. That is one of the things that also needs to be that is just one of the, it's one of the fundamental, I think I should have like some fundamental rules, like fundamental rules of whatever. If you are X, Y, and Z, then these things are going to be true about you. But in any relationship, there's always varying levels of understanding. In other words, one person can always understand the other person more than reverse. It's almost like saying there has to be a leader. in other words, right? That someone has
Mm.
to either by actual understanding or by by the fact that they are responsible, right? By the leadership model, they have to have more understand, or they are kind of by just kind of the mechanism of how things work are the more understanding one than the other way around. So when you that fact plus the fact that people have these different sizes of reservoirs for these different functions of human beings, right? The extroverted feeling function we were talking about, right? All that kind of stuff and the parties and all that kind of thing. If there can be, in other words, if you happen to be the one that understands it, then you have to quell down your the degree to which it disturbs you that you're being assaulted by people who don't understand it. Look, because it's a card. Like, look, the card you're dealt. Okay, it's almost like the card you're dealt is such that social this the court of public opinion is never going to vote in your favor. No, you're the bad person because good people wanted the donuts and the smiles. That is the a definition of good. You know that that's a secular kind of almost um, very, very much popular culture definition of good is that smiling at a party thing. You know what I mean? And if you are not doing it, then you must be bad. And you're not going to fight a social battle over that and win. And the herd is going to run you off a cliff. Like, no, you're bad. Why don't you want to go? Why don't you want to go to picnics with us? Only bad people don't want to go to picnics with us. So, in other words, if you're the one, because now I'm going to come in and say, yeah, in this case, you're the one standing at a higher level of understanding. You can understand them, but they cannot understand you. And that is a burden as well as a, shall we say, benefit, right? You never get any benefit for free. Okay.
That's
The benefit is you actually have a high understanding, but they can't understand you, and you have to succumb in a way to their herd, whatever, and blah blah blah. Anyways, whatever. You get it.
right. It's another way of saying, well, okay. So the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So, um, it and the reason for that is because their perspective is more well known than your perspective. So you have to end up sort of bending to that because you at least know what that is. More people know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Other folks have not made their grievances known.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they've, yeah. So it's like a version of that.
Mm-hmm. You know,
Um,
something else just came. I'm sorry. It's a crazy situation about this whole kind of chaotic genius thing because I think that you are going to find out that you end up being in the side of chaos when this comes up in the sense that you tend to, or people like, let's say you, okay, in whatever some of these parameters which we're just playing with now, okay, I'll say, okay, kind of shifted on one side of the distribution, a couple of standard deviations on to the right, right? You're gonna benefit actually from chaos, okay, more than if things were more orderly. I don't know if you can kind of intuit why that would be the case, because in the land of chaos, uh,
well, you
the
can't predict anything in the land of chaos.
you
So,
cannot, but you're better off than the rest of the people. This is a Machiavellian way of
no, no,
looking
no.
at the world, I
It
guess.
makes sense. Well, no, it makes sense in that, uh, in where things are, okay. So what are we what verbiage are we using for the opposite of chaos? Order? Are we saying
Yeah,
order and
when
chaos?
things are
Okay,
orderly. Yeah.
okay. So the thing is that the orderly person, we know what they're going to do
Hmm.
because they're orderly. You can predict what it is that they're going to do, but they cannot predict what you're going to do. So that
Hmm.
always gives you an advantage.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
also the fact that we were talking earlier about technique versus, if you will, soul, and then improvisation kind of being a thread that weaved those concepts together. Improvisation falls in your territory as this chaotic genius person, or it will not be you are more able because you have more degrees of freedom, right? When you're these kinds of 2 steps away from the 2 standard deviations away, right? You have
Right.
more capacity to move, both intellectually and also in real time. You will just move out of the city, right? You don't get stuck because, oh well, my God, this is where my mom or whatever grew up, right? You don't get stuck mentally there. You don't get stuck physically, right? You actually have movement potential, and as a result, it gives you a great deal of advantage when it comes to being able to improvise in chaos. Hence, you benefit more from a chaotic system. You see, when there's a lot of order, it can start to cramp your. You might think you want more order, but it might start to crimp your
I see.
style because it's not going to be the order. Because you know whose order is going to be? It's going to be the order of the pancakes and the backslapping and the smiling and the.
That's right.
It's
You're
going to
right.
be their order. Okay, it's going to be sheep order.
Yeah. And so, okay, so so something that is interesting here, and something I think about and wonder about, is how much of what it is that we're calling chaos is really uh, a much deeper exploration of order.
100%, because it's just a question of scale. Another question: if we put a border around somewhere, both time, spatially, arrangement wise, and we call it chaos, right? If something is
Right.
bouncing up and down, and then in midair, the particles kind of mix, and then in that midair particle kind of going crazy. If you kind of picture like throwing a bucket of soil up and down or something, we could call that chaos, but there is a general order to the whole picture of the bucket of the soil going up and down. Total mass goes up, total mass comes down. In the middle, it's crazy, chaotic, whatever, right? So 100%. And also in terms of scales, you zoom in, looks disorderly, and then you zoom in. Oh, look, atoms, a lot of order, and then you zoom into the atoms, and oh crap, I don't know where the electron is anymore. That kind of a thing where now it's fuzzy again, right? It becomes quantum mechanical. So this
Right.
happens in scale arrangement and so on and so forth. So but regardless though, the fact that you're able to know this, the fact that you're able to see that scale matters in terms of one's view of order and or chaos, and then move within it, makes
Right.
it such that you have a great advantage in a disorderly world.
Right.
um
Yep.
yeah, because in an orderly world, people would kill. Oh yeah, yeah, we kill scientists, let's say, right? Or we torture them, or we do some kinds of things for our particular superstitions. It doesn't have to be scientists. It may just be the simple monkey analogy with the monkey and the ladder. And we kill people who want to go up and get the banana, right, from that ladder. If we recall the experiment that I'm referring to, and for those whom are not, for those whom are listening, then just go look up a banana and ladder monkey experiment. But basically, we keep each other from doing certain things. We have a certain kind of fixed mindset narrative about why things will always be a certain way, and excuses and so on and so forth, and rationalizations. But we're starting. If I suspect, I'm not looking at the time, but I think we're probably starting to go long. Uh, yeah,
We have a couple minutes.
we do have a
No.
couple of minutes. Okay, so let me start by doing let's try a quick recap here, okay? Because we've been talking in
Sure.
the past conversations about the haters, okay? The enemies of progress, we call them. We said, how do we spot them, right? In other words, how does one define them? We talked about the fact that people can bring certain things to the table, such as inspirational people, such as people who can teach you, such as people whom can work side by side with you, give sweat equity, people whom can give you opportunity, people whom can give you capital. And people whom don't have this, well, that's one level of hater, right? They're not really hating on you, but they're not particularly beneficial. So go into a room whereby people always have something above you, at least in relevant parameters, one or two parameters, and so on and so forth. You don't want to be the best person in that room. So, and then we went on and on about kind of breaking down the levels of hatery, if you will, all the way through to people who are trying to sabotage you. And then we talked about the fact that you need to cut them off. How do you cut them off? But today we went into more subtle aspects, such as how do you know which particular compartment to put this person? Because again, we came up with a working definition of what we're talking about here, which is compartmentalizing people based on trust and function, putting them in the right box, putting not maybe they don't belong in the inner sanctum, maybe they belong 2 rooms, in the outer room over there, maybe they belong in the atrium or something like that. Who knows what these rooms are called? But now we're talking about some more subtle things, such as how about the chaotic genius? How about the person that kind of evades your neat categories, but they're good in this particular thing? And we talk about the subtleties that involves, and we talk about the enemy that you need to keep close. Okay, that was another kind of a simple thing that we did. We talked about unequally yoked people. That was a simple one, in the sense that you just kind of, you got to change the system in such a way, and if it's not politically expedient, got to make it in such a way that they do not cause political drama. And then we started landing the plane over here, which with some more subtle things. And then Dr. Thunder says that we have a couple of minutes, and then he's gonna give us some final thoughts.
Yeah. So I, yeah, the, the issue of what to do with someone that you inherited is an issue that is going to occur if you're going to be in any sort of leadership position, administrative position. You're going to inherit people, and necessarily what's going to happen is some of their skill sets are not going to be ideal, and some of the ways that they're oriented are not going to be ideal for your particular approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so the strength of the leadership tact, or that capability, is that you can adjust to the people that are around you. You can figure out, you can see what qualities they have, and maybe you need to repurpose some things. And so maybe you need to move some people around to get the sort of best thing out of the folks. But you may, and it's likely that you'll end up in a situation where there is someone that's in there that really you need that person out of there, and you have to figure out what the strategy, what the politics are involved in making that move. And figuring out how to do that in a way that doesn't cause you yourself to be dismissed will will be an important skill to acquire.
Mm-hmm. 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 Well, ladies and gentlemen, I did drop the link and said that someone has 5 minutes if they can make it. You know, uh, because
Okay,
we're supposed to be giving people time on the show, generally speaking, but we tend not to. But um, if it doesn't
because we
work
have
out
such
this time,
great things to say. I mean,
because we absolutely.
the what who else do we need to hear from, man? You know. Uh, okay, that was a joke in case someone doesn't know how to tell that was a joke. Anyhow, I know everyone is peeping my "Black Men Are Perfect" T-shirt here. That's shout out to O'Shea Duke Jackson.
Did you get that in the mail? You
I
you
did.
ordered it?
I ordered it. I hit the link. You know.
Hey,
Hey,
it's the
Hey,
white
peeps.
person.
how are you doing?
Doing good. The pigs are watered, and the dog is fed, and the eggs are gathered, and all the
You
other
got
things.
that. You got that farmer internet. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I'm a
are.
little. I'm usually.
You,
Yeah, I'm way off the beaten path today.
yeah. Okay. Cool. 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 Are you in Where are you? You're in New Mexico or what?
Yeah, yeah. I'm in New Mexico. I'm just in my parents' place.
New Mexico
They're
and the parents'
at our
place
other
with
place,
chickens
100 miles
and
from here.
cows and stuff. Okay. Excellent. So I know that you got active in the chat when we were talking about the subtleties of this, shall we say, grossly speaking, technique versus soul, right? Um, and you had a lot of like, oh, but when you're over here with dancing with the muse and it affects your soul, and you can the golden showers of that sounds interesting. Sounds like Jordan Peterson
it was a
in the
debate I
Golden
couldn't
Showers
resist.
orgy.
It was
But
just, yeah, it was a debate I couldn't resist. Like it was just aching to be,
okay, so
argued.
you have your
The other
time, okay? You have
side
because I want to
taking.
make sure you have your time and this response. So 3 minutes to start with. Go ahead. Get what is your case? Because there was enough back and forth. So no point to reiterate or rehash. But from the level of iteration, the level of the spiral we've gone to, what is your case? 3 minutes.
Okay, on the music thing. From experience, it's like I think, and I'm talking about, let's say, musicians of any type that are past sort of the average, slightly above average good, right? Like not talking about just people who have instruments, but let's say people we would classify as musicians, that you would consider for your band. Like one of my opinions is that I think sometimes learning music first is used as a crutch for some people. Like I play a lot of with a lot of Western swing people, so that's a pretty sophisticated music, right? And I've seen both sides, and I've played with bands that they were all reading off sheet music, and it's a little lifeless, and they're really good musicians. So I feel like I've seen it where people who do have whatever the thing we're talking about, the groove, they then lack it when they're reading it off sheet music. So it ends up kind of like turning off of sheet music, right, where everybody's playing the same thing at the same time versus playing off of other members of a band. I think that's probably the most fundamental difference in the way that it is. I think those are my main points.
Those are your main points, and I'll let
But I
Dr.
do think that
Thunder
last one
respond.
is significant.
Okay.
Well, I think
It's probably just a way of her coming out here talking about her liking black guys with all this groove and soul stuff. But let's continue with the music thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Thunder.
So what's I think, depending on the level of the musician, that's going to pretty much make all the decision here. If the musicians are sort of not great musicians, adequate musicians, maybe to read the music and to play it, accurately, but not sort of upper crust, musicians, first call musicians, like if the kind of musician that gets called when, say Aretha Franklin is in town, the musician that gets called to play in the horn section or in the orchestra, that level of musician is going to be obviously at a different level than maybe like a community band or like a
Right.
even like a community college or something, or even college students. There's a lot of college students that have a lot of technical proficiency, but they haven't sort of developed that other thing that they need, that sort of personality or So I think it just depends on who it is that we're talking about, because the best musicians are the
The
ones
sample
that
I'm talking about
can be.
is
Did you crash and burn over there in Roswell, New Mexico?
But anyway, the best musicians are the ones that could be reading something, but you're totally fooled. You don't think that they're reading something. It's full of emotion. It's full of soul and everything else, but they're just so good at what it is that they do that you can't tell the difference.
1 minute to Audra, and then we'll wrap
All
this
right.
up. So 1 minute conclusion.
Yeah, I don't think
Of
we
the
disagree
beef.
there. Like the particular example that I was referencing sort of as an anchor for my point. Oh, am I still here? That
Yeah, you're
anchor
good.
for my point is, you just made my face big. It surprised me. Yeah, so I was talking about very high level musicians, and I had heard them play to some extent in both ways, right? So that's why I thought it was interesting. That was the first time I really sort of had a good sample to observe what I was talking about, where it's like they and I've done the same thing. It's like learning a language. I've tried to learn languages via audio only, and then I've done the Rosetta Stone thing, and the Rosetta Stone thing seems really easy for a minute, but it goes away really fast because it's like too much assistance. It's like there's too many sensory inputs. It's like it's really easy to go off of it, but there's not as much engagement with it. It's almost too easy sometimes. But yeah, I was referencing like professional, high level, mostly violinists and fiddle players. I have the largest sample of that, but yeah, I wasn't talking about the neighborhood bands.
Yeah, Dr. Thunder just relegated you. She was like, oh, she must be playing with those community college people. Yeah, I know. Yeah, look, you know what?
Well, I mean, I
tell you something.
Yeah, well, no, I think that there are. I mean, I play with all kinds of folks, and certainly I've played with musicians where it seemed like they were being pretty mechanical by reading what it was that they were playing. But I mean, but I also play in bands. I played a gig last week. I'm going to play one this week too, with a band that we're reading everything. It's a big band, so we're reading everything. But I mean, it doesn't sound like it. So it's I think it just depends.
Yeah, and that might
we'd have to listen to the same thing. We'd have to be listening to the same thing, and then you'd have to describe to me what you're hearing.
Well, like what you're talking about, you're playing with a big. I would ask, like, how long have you played with the band? Because that might help alleviate the problem. So it's like if you've played with if the members of the band, of quite a few of them are the same and they have played with each other, you can kind of get.
Yeah.
That gets easier, right? It's like that's different than just going in for like a session or with playing with people that you've never heard of. So like, again, the example I was using was actually a pretty clean example because it was a bunch of top class musicians at a sort of weird gathering of, and they ended up doing a show, but with very little practice and together,
Right.
But, so they didn't have a feel for each other and they were reading off the music and it was good, but it wasn't knowing what they were capable of. It's like, it wasn't, like I've played with community, with ragtag bands that with that amount of practice and impromptuness showed up that had more, soul or groove or whatever you want to say. Like, I think it's it's just an interesting, like I said, it's interesting to me how I don't.
Ding. Ding ding.
It's a bad thing at all. Okay.
Okay. Your internet went crazy, but you had your minute, and we have we now have to conclude this installment. Okay.
It was fun.
Hey,
it was a good conversation, you guys. I enjoyed listening.
Oh, well, thank you.
Hey, I do want to plug something if you don't mind.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
So tomorrow on Thunder's Thoughts, that'll be on my channel. Just look for Dr. Thunder, but also I think folks have been putting it in. Nicer just put it in the chat. It's my channel. So tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Dr. Doug and I will be chopping it up on this topic. Was St. Paul the first MGTOW? Was St. Paul the first MGTOW? And in that conversation, we'll discuss the free agent lifestyle. We're going to talk about so-called monk mode and some of the interesting intersections between stages of the sort of red pill journey and aspects of organized religion, in particular the Christian religion, the early church in particular. So it's going to be a really, really interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to that. We had a good show last week, and actually in the show last week, we did a show on Saturday Well, it was last week, isn't it? We did a show on Saturday, Doug and I, and the sort of idea for this topic sort of arose in that show. So kind of organic, but it's pretty down the middle in a lot of ways, but also I think unusual sort of comparison. So it's going to be a great conversation. So stop on by and check it out. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. That's August 4th, tomorrow, 7 p.m. And yeah, and I've got second Thursdays coming up. So next week, of course, Ike and I will be back here for Getting Ish Done at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And of course, that show's at 9:30. And then that Thursday, so next week, Thursday, I've got my monthly Dr. Thunder Quartet live stream, streamed live from Blue Note Jazz Cafe. And that's a 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time show. Please come and drop by and support and all of that good stuff. All right.
All right. Plug and Chuck, shout out to Blind Guy, his wife, their life. And we are out until next time. Remember to get your Black Gunner Perfect t-shirts.
That's right.
I like O'Shea over there. O'Shea, Duke, Jackson. Does it how many colors did you get, by the way?
I just got the one shirt. I'm gonna just the black with the white type, but they've got like, I think it's got like red shirts and all kind of stuff. So I'm gonna get a few of them. I wanted to make sure that the shirt fit before I got a bunch of them. So it fits good. It's a good shirt.
All right. Well, until next time, ladies and gentlemen. And as for me, I will be back tomorrow here with Joan, and we'll be reviewing another fresh piece of hot content from the sheep media, ladies and gentlemen, from how things actually work, from the middle of the bell curve, from how, people who actually make the actual rules, the actual humanity. Okay. We're going to be reviewing them and what they are doing out there these days. All right. So, and after that, I will be back with a special show on Sunday, usual time, around 6 p.m. Pacific time. Yeah, 6 p.m. Pacific. Until then, we're out. Peace.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.